The 5-on-5 sessions is our planning committee idea to try to do something a little bit different than everyone giving their 10 to 15-minute talk. And the two moderators for each of these sessions will lay the background for the audience with a 5-minute brief introduction. And then each of the panelists on all these sessions will have one slide and a couple of minutes to describe their slide and try to bring the group into a discussion. So we'll try that format and see how it goes. It's pretty new. I have very seasoned people up there, so I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun to have an ongoing discussion rather than consecutive presentations. All right, so with that, Naomi, Don, take it away.
Thank you, Anthony. Wonderful to be here, and thanks for making sure the sun came out. It's looking good outside. I'm Naomi Freed. I'm the former Chief Innovation Officer at Boston Children's Hospital. I'm delighted to be co-moderating this panel with Don Lombardi today. And we have a very distinguished group of panelists. And what we're hoping to do is for Don and I to provide a little bit of background, and then we're going to hear from each of the panelists. They'll share one slide, a couple minutes, and then we hope to get into a conversation and a discussion with you also. So I also prepared one slide, and it's on the innovation life cycle, which I think is a very useful framing paradigm that I developed to explain how innovation happens in the healthcare environment. Innovation in most services would follow this structure. Product innovation a little bit different. It's comprised of 6 steps. You're innovators. You're probably very familiar with the first step, which is initiating the process, thinking about the challenge, the opportunity, the problem that you need to solve, then moving into ideation, thinking about potential solutions, and then, of course, what we all get really excited about, building a pilot, a mock-up, and we talk a lot about failure as part of the innovation life cycle, and if you're going to fail, this is where it happens, in the pilot phase, and happen to believe that early, fast, cheap failure is a form of success. Now, in the ideal world, when you've had a successful pilot, then you tell other people about this wonderful new idea, and they rapidly embrace it, and everybody uses this new innovation. The fact of the matter is we don't live in that ideal world. We live in a world where people are a little more reluctant to embrace change and try new ideas. And so actually in the real world, what we find is that there is a barrier to diffusion of new ideas. And I coined the term the operationalization gap, or OGAP, for this diffusion barrier or challenge. We see OGAPs primarily in large organizations with a lot of different silos, not so much in startups, and not really in command and control organizations like the US military. There's a lot of things that can be done to close the OGAP, engaging leadership, focusing on change management. But probably the most important piece of advice I can give you as an innovator is to be aware of the OGAP and to plan for it. And what that usually means is getting folks who are going to be involved later in the life cycle into the life cycle process with you early on in the ideation phase, in the pilot phase. That, more than anything, will help you close that OGAP. Once you're across the OGAP, you're on to operationalization. That's when the organization experiences the full value of this new innovation. And then there's optimization, where the innovation's in the hands of the end user and they're tweaking it. And then, of course, no life cycle goes on forever, and at some point you need to obsolete it, repeat, and start the process over again. I think this innovation life cycle helps innovators know what to expect, and it helps organizations plan where to place their resources. So that's my little update on the innovation life cycle. I want to turn it over now to Don to share a little bit about his work.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and Anthony, thank you for bringing us all together here. This is very exciting. My name is Don Lombardi. I got into the pediatric innovation business probably before some of you were born. I'm just kidding. But like Naomi, I was at Boston Children's from 1991 to 2006, and what innovation meant at that early stage was kind of classical tech transfer, which is what I did. To see what we have around here today, people coming together with many ideas of what it means to be innovative, what it means to advance innovations, is really a thrill. And I'm, again, thank Anthony for bringing us all together. And we have in the panel here 6 people, each of whom has a take on innovation, and we're going to have each of them present what they are doing very briefly, and have a discussion about sort of some of the general things to learn about innovation that can be taught by their models, by their cases. So just to have my little say, I'd like to talk a bit about what my organization is doing in innovation. So why don't you go forward a couple of slides? There we go. So I work with Texas Children's, Rainbow, Stanford, and Shriners. They sponsor us, and we are using an innovation model that goes along the same general pattern as the one that Naomi outlined. But I think what's a little different about what we're doing is that we're focusing on areas that have both clinical significance and financial significance to the hospitals, because this is an area where we think we can make a business case for new medical devices. And the particular area that we've been focused on is hospital-acquired conditions such as device-related pressure ulcers and central line-associated infections. What's a little different about this is that the participants in this process is the nursing staff, and we bring nurses together from the 4 hospitals through a series of workshops to study these problems and come up with potential business cases for solutions. So that's our model. So I want to turn this over next to Gavin Bogle, ask him to introduce himself and present his slide.
Nope. So I'm Gavin Bogle. I'm a patent attorney. I'm actually part of an innovative virtual law firm. We're in Toronto, Boston, and Newport Beach. Some of our clients are probably here today. They include Sick Kids, MIT, Stanford, and Duke University. We have, and their spin-off companies, which is one of the most interesting aspects. What I was going to talk today about was very quickly about something to do with patents. And first, I wanted to say that the role of a patent is to create incentives to innovate. That was what Thomas Jefferson came up with. That's what it's supposed to do. That's not what most people think of when they hear the word patent anymore. When I ask people what is a patent, a lot of academics think that patents are related to publications. But really, a patent is a right to exclude other people from doing something. And if you don't want to exclude anybody else from doing something, you should probably save the, say, global $100,000 it'll cost you to get a global patent portfolio and spend all that money on advertising or marketing. The other thing I just wanted to say, because people are often confused when they look at a patent, they don't know what to look at. And I always tell people, go to the back and look at the claims. Because out of the whole, in biotechnology and healthcare, they tend to be large patent applications. The only thing that really matters is right at the back, and it basically takes up a paragraph. Just some advice. And I guess with that, I'll leave it and ask if anybody else wants to comment or ask a question or about patents. Anybody on the panel?
So Gavin, talk about what stage in the innovation process it makes most sense to file a patent.
Usually so it depends who you're talking about. When I deal with welders or I deal with pediatric surgeons, I put those in one camp. They should patent early because they're, pediatric surgeons are always in their garages making new tools because until recently, the big medical device companies often are not interested in the smaller market. So these innovators have learned to go into their garage and make the tools that they need to treat their patients. The same thing goes for the auto mechanics in the garage who make their own tools constantly. In that case, it would make sense if you have commercial aspirations Nobody likes to be copied. People are we generally get the idea that if you develop something and make it, somehow you have a right to make some money off it. And when somebody comes along and says, hey, that's a good idea, and just copies it, we feel wronged somehow. That has developed into the patent system. What I would say is that, so for certain people, you want to patent early. For other people, like pharmaceuticals, it actually makes sense to patent much later, much, much later, because of the long life cycle. I've worked on pharmaceutical development with academics, usually on the other side. I worked at a large pharmaceutical company. And we would always we had license from an academic, but knowing that the reality was it was 20 years before that was going to hit the market and make any money. And so all the money that was spent on that early stage patenting by that academic institution could well have been spent better on other things, I would say.
I had a quick question, too. You mentioned the cost of a global patent portfolio or just spend the money on advertising. Is it mostly one of the two or somewhere in the middle?
Well, I usually recommend to people actually to be completely honest, and right now I'm in Canada. Having said that, I'm a US patent attorney. I tell people, generally, file in the US. If you're gonna launch a new product, chances are you need to be in the US to make it worthwhile to launch it here, to launch it globally. So save your money, file in the US where it's very inexpensive to file and get a patent. That's a relative term. But it won't cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'd often tell people, file in the US. It's a good intermediate step.
I think one of the hardest questions is what is patentable? Like, what's an idea that's worth a patent and what's not? That's a bigger question maybe, but.
So I have a talk on that. I actually gave it last spring in Chicago, but I'd be happy to do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow afternoon. But absolutely, and that is the conversation going on among patent attorneys and the Supreme Court over the last couple of years. For example, diagnostics are basically not patentable anymore.
I think also within the area of digital health, where some of us are working and building new mobile apps, we're also thinking about how do we protect these ideas, or do we? And what would you recommend to your clients that are building new apps?
So a little bit of cynicism is going to come out when I say this, but in general, I tell people software is not patentable. But that's not completely true. But in general, I would recommend in the digital world that the best way to protect yourself is a lot of marketing and hard work to become first in the market.
Great. Any other questions before we move to our next panelists? Okay. Matthew?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Matthew Komianos, and I work with Google. And prior to this, I've worked in various roles, working with different parts of healthcare IT and imaging systems. And so I've seen a few of the different ways departments use workflows. And here at Google, it's been great to see a very innovative company and how our culture kind of fosters that. And it's nice to be here at a conference that deals with innovation and how we can build a culture that does foster that. And because we really live in a neat time right now where everything is moving very fast. We're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of new technologies that are changing the ways that we live. And as organizations that are fairly advanced and have a lot of talent, now we need to look at how can we be the innovators, how can we act quickly and really disrupt our own markets before somebody else does, because if we can't act fast, somebody else will, be on our heels. And the example that I always like to give is that, if we kind of backtrack to 2008 and talk to the hotel industry and said, you have a competitor that's coming onto the market, and within a couple of years, we'll have 1.5 million rooms that come online and will be directly challenging you. A lot of people would find that pretty hard to believe, but now a technology, Airbnb, has done that. So there are technologies that people are working on that can really come in to disrupt organizations, which is a good thing for us as a society because we're seeing all these great things come about that can change our lives. And so to use Google as an example, coming all the way from 2 Stanford students that worked in their garage to with the goal of organizing the world's information and making it easily accessible to everybody. It's a pretty lofty goal. And so they've grown this into what's now a household name in a very large organization. And so how do we keep a large organization innovative and able to move quickly? And I think it really goes back to, at the core culture of that organization, to encourage and foster innovative ideas. And so the example that I would use that we have here at Google is our 20% model. And what that is each employee is encouraged to spend 20% of their work time on something that's not related to their core job. And so, if we picture one day a week that we're working on something that's not your primary job, but you're coming up with ideas, and you can post those internally and encourage other Googlers. I'm going to use a Google term of Googlers. You can encourage others to join you and spend their 20% time to work on that project with you. And there's going to be things that come about that fail, and at Google we really embrace something that's going to fail, but we want to fail quickly. We want to come up with something, and if it's not going to work, fail and move on. But just as an example of something that's come out of this 20% project is Gmail. So it's, we aim to come out with something with a huge goal of reaching 1 billion users, and that's really the goal that we have for our applications. And through employees spending 20% of their time on something different, they came up with the largest email platform in the world. So ideas like this that kind of go to the core of our culture help to bring about ideas, and I think within everybody's organization, if you have these types of cultures that encourage this, you'll be able to really utilize the talent and the expertise that you have within the people in your organization.
I have a question for you, Matthew. So I think in creating a culture of innovation, it's important to create a safe environment where people can take risks, where they can fail, where there's no punishment, and that actually failure is celebrated or at least seen as a learning opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about how Google deals with failure and what there is in the culture that would sort of support that concept?
Sure. So we're really, in our culture, we really talk about another Google term is googliness. And so what googliness is really goes back to just of what you were talking about, being very encouraging of people, and if ideas do come up that fail, there's really not a stigma put on that. And managers encourage employees to bring up ideas, to share them with others. So it's really from management to peers, everybody from the time that you start at Google, you are encouraged to bring up ideas and not be afraid, whatever it is. Even if you, and it really goes down to the fact of finding what is your passion within each employee. So if even if you're in a role and you're finding a different role within Google that you would rather do, you're encouraged to tell your manager that, tell your organization, then over time they can get you into something that really fits what your passion is. And rather than being afraid of saying, hey, you're not going to be working on your core job, it's saying, we have somebody who's talented, let's find what their passion is, and then that's where they'll excel.
Matthew, there was an article in today's New York Times, at least the print edition, I couldn't find it online, and it had to do with all the emerging technologies that are coming out from Google and others, and emphasizing the fact that, sort of related to what you're talking about, there's a real incentive to put something out there, however rough it is, and then iterate and improve it. And I think Google is really famous for having that approach. Yet here we are in a healthcare environment where things that aren't 100% may go against the grain of organizations that are inherently striving towards zero failure. So how do you, in the health innovation area, deal with that dilemma?
Sure. So I think to your point, the Google mode of bringing products to market is to say we'll have a lofty goal of whether it's reaching 1 billion people or whether it's tackling a certain problem, and then we can say even if we develop a product that accomplishes 50% of that goal or 20%, let's put it out to market or a piece of that market so people can test it, people can give us feedback, we can collect data on it, and then we can continually improve. But it's I would say having the courage to put a product out before it reaches perfection of what you're looking to accomplish, and being able to refine it over time.
Thank you. All right. Dr. Green?
Thanks. Innovation is like sex. Living creatures have a lot of different strategies for being able to reproduce, and roughly they fall into 2 types, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Now, the asexual reproduction is really efficient and makes a lot of sense. Basically, all you do is you clone what works. You copy what's already been successful, and every now and then there's innovation or mutation, innovation, whatever you want to call it. And it works. And a lot of medicine is advanced that way. We copy and clone our best practices and ways of doing things from one medical center to another. But sexual reproduction is exciting and risky and innovative. And the way that it works is you have to swap genes with somebody else. It's kind of scary. And that somebody else, for this to be really good, shouldn't be really close to you. You don't want to be your sibling or your cousin even. Or even probably somebody from the same HLA type often. You want different genes involved. And then here's the risky part, the scary part. For sexual reproduction to work, you have to, in each offspring, let go of half of your own genes. You have to let go of half of your own genes. So for me, I'm involved in a bunch of different things. At Scanadu, we could never have done a tricorder. Or at UBiome, we could never have sequenced the biggest data set of human microbiome. Or at drgreen.com never leapt onto the web with pediatrics. And in our private practice, we could never innovate every day if we didn't get real different perspectives from real different disciplines and industries and types of people and didn't hold on to our physician hat. And if we didn't let go of our own perspective and break barriers. Sex often doesn't follow the rules as much as people want it to. And we're talking about fostering innovation and creating a culture, and that's great. We should do that. But, a lot of the best innovation happens when people just say, as somebody has said, no, you can't do this, and they do it anyway. It's when you find the passion, where you find the spark. So the one last thing I want to leave you with today is something from evolutionary theory, is the Red Queen hypothesis. And it's from Alice in Wonderland, or Alice Through the Looking Glass. And the Red Queen talked about how you have to run as fast as you can in this behind the looking glass world to be able to stay in the same spot. And in evolutionary theory, in a period where there's lots of innovation, lots of evolution, lots of change happening, where the environment's changing, you have to innovate and evolve and adapt and proliferate. You have to scale just to survive. Not to gain an advantage, just to be there in the next generation. And this conference is Pediatrics 2040. We're talking about 25 years from now. And I can pretty confidently say that innovation is not an option. It's not a tag-on or an extra little department that's interesting or cool, or not a marketing play. And everything that we know about pediatrics today won't be here in 25 years unless we innovate. Our current best practices and hospitals and systems, and even pediatrics itself will be so different. So get out there, have lots of great safe sex.
Dr. Green, could you give us an example that illustrates
Yeah, well, the Scanadu example, it was started by a guy, Walter de Brouwer, and his wife, Sam, who were not physicians, not involved in medicine at all. Their kid was injured, fell out a window. They spent a year at the ICU at their child's bedside and said, we want the data that's going on. They didn't understand it. And everybody told them they were crazy, they were wrong, they shouldn't be doing this. We got this team. We have physicians and parents and mathematicians and designers and so many different disciplines that come together and argue and have our perspectives and really mix it up together and end up with something that's elegant and doesn't look medical or feel medical and breaks out of the system walls. So as one example is that.
Thank you.
But in our pediatric practice, it's like that too. Every time a patient walks in the door, we say, if you could wave a magic wand and make this any way you wanted it to look, what would it look like? And then we take them seriously. And not to just, so they say, we don't want a waiting room. And how would we do that? And we think about it, and we say, how would we do that to them? And so our practice is getting farther and farther from a traditional practice every day.
Thank you.
All right. I think we have Jeff up next.
Good, thanks. I decided to be innovative. I actually don't have a slide, and but I like the last two. So if you wanted to flap back and forth between Matt and Dr. Green's, I think Google's really cool. And what can you say? Who's against sex? I mean, I started. I'm a pediatrician. I started my interest in innovation as a resident quite a while ago when I noticed that there were babies in the ICU, $1 million babies, and yet this is at Yale, a few blocks away where most of them were coming from. There was no prenatal care, and the interesting thing was not that that was the case, which a lot of people would have noticed, but it was that it wasn't even a question that it wasn't a case, and that got me on a journey. And I've also, between being in practice and been fortunate to get involved in a number of startups, one with Steve Case and another one that was building kind of a model for global innovation that we sold to PwC, which is where I'm hanging out these days. And one of the kind of journey, I wanted to just share two things with you about innovation that seem to be relevant to pediatrics and maybe universal rules. Because I think, basically, as you were saying, pediatrics, I believe, is going to actually not just be a peripheral tag-along with innovation between now and 2040. I actually think pediatrics is going to be at the center. And the reason is for that word passion. Ultimately, innovation has a whole lot to do with passion, with beauty, with creating things that make a difference and that have meaning. And as those of us who are involved in the world of trying to make life better for children, there is no better place to find passion than in the world of children, in my view. There are two things that I've kind of picked up along the way that I wanted to share about innovation. The first is simplicity. Simplicity and a corollary of it, which is quality. There's a great Steve Jobs quote that says that it's better to hit a home run every day than 2 doubles. And the idea is focus on the things that you think make a difference, and that usually if they make a difference, they're elegant and they're simple. And there's a lot of examples of that. But as we drive towards simplicity, what you're holding in your hand is an example. When we drive towards simplicity, we end up usually focusing our minds and getting a much better kind of result. And it also allows us to eliminate clutter. The second is a trend I wanted to offer for the group as well to discuss. And I think a fundamental trend in what's happening in innovation, and that is the vast democratization of innovation that we're going to see. Really, it started now, but over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a massive thing. And if you look at things, like Odex Desk or Freelancer, where essentially 2/3 of the world is not online. By the way, they're going to be probably 1/3 of that group will be coming online in the next 5 years. Globally, we're going to see a vast influx of a workforce with a lot of talent that can be accessed. And that's just one trend among many, which point to the fact that innovation is going to become much easier. The barriers are going to come down. It's going to become something that is taught in schools, that is a reflex that all of us are a very welcome kind of reflex to develop. And I think the implication of that is that the sort of O cycle that you talked about that is, we hope, is going to go from O to 0. The whole point is to eliminate the friction. And I personally believe it's going to be possible to create companies in healthcare for 1/10 the price and 1/10 of the time in many, many instances. And we have to drive toward that. We happen to be working on a global platform to work on that issue. There's a lot of opportunity to improve how we innovate, but the technology is not only going to be possible to use technologies as the devices themselves or the source of the innovation. We're actually going to be able to use technology to change dramatically the innovation process. And I think it's by focusing on beauty, meaning, passion, simplicity, and using that to democratize innovation, I'm hopeful that we're going to make a big difference in the lives of children.
Thank you. We'll go on to William.
I'm going to follow up on actually some of those themes. I'm a neonatologist, and I am passionate about taking care of babies. I've been doing a lot of quality improvement work for many years, and as we were getting ready to rebuild our NICU in a few years, I was thinking about what goes into NICU design. And a couple years ago, before my sabbatical, my wife and I were watching on 60 Minutes a piece on IDEO and Stanford Design School, David Kelly, who founder of both. And she said, why don't you do some of the D School? I said, okay, fine. And I looked into classes and ended up teaching one there instead on redesigning the neonatal ICU. And it's been pretty transformational for me to realize that there is perhaps even a better way to do improvement and improve safety and the experience for all parties concerned, babies, parents, staff. And just a quick overview of what the sort of the D School human-centered design goes through. It's a little bit of a variation on what the first slide that was shown is starting out with empathizing, and there are certainly, you can do it in the field, you can have user interviews, you learn very empathetic interviewing to really try to see what is the core of the problem. Because if you go upstream, you can realize you can sometimes solve these problems in a much more dramatic fashion and more impactful fashion. And it also inspires you in terms of what your improvement idea is going to be. And then ultimately, once you've, the other environments, we have a simulation center at Stanford, Center for Advanced Pediatric and Perinatal Education, which is a mock delivery room and resuscitation room, because you can't always be in the nursery, which is a busy place. So sometimes you can test your ideas out there as well. But that's the next step being defining some need. What the point of view of Jeff needs a new way of hearing about his medical information because he's frustrated with what information he's received so far. So really being need-based in your definition of your idea. And then the ideate part, which is really fun, brainstorming and being very open-minded and creative in type of solutions that you think about. And some of that was done in the workshops yesterday that I was able to witness. And it really is, you shouldn't be limited necessarily by technology, because technology can change, thanks to people like Google. And you should, again, later on apply rules to narrow down which may be more practical. And that establishes your first prototype. And then you go into the cycle of prototyping and testing and prototyping and testing. And back to Steve Jobs, he started out with a wooden block that he said, oh, look, this is going to revolutionize this. This was a wooden block that he carried around for a long time. And it has indeed revolutionized. I think they have $1 billion sales of iPhones now. Remarkable number. So the idea that you can start with a low resolution prototype and improve it, and then build on technology. A couple other points in terms of design thinking, I think, is just coming into healthcare, sort of thanks to industry. Industry gave us Toyota Lean, Six Sigma, but there's a lot of designers out there, and there are private design companies that you can interface with. We're fortunate to have IDEO nearby. If you're in an academic institution, look at your engineering department. They're going to have design thinkers as well. And I think we need to interact more with that group to promote promote the idea of design thinking in healthcare. And then ultimately reaching out to other technologies. So A family friend of ours had recently retired from Apple, and as a senior executive, he came to the nursery and said, why on earth are the nurses doing this to enter data into the computer? And it's like, well, because it's what we always did, right? Well, no. So sometimes the technology will drive the improvement within healthcare, and we have to reach out to our technology partners to see how that can happen. So good luck in all your design thinking and all your innovation.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. This is a little bit of a model. So I'm the executive director of digital health at Seattle Children's, and I kind of came to that, as probably many of you know, as a pediatrician blogger. I've been blogging a couple times a week for about 6.5 years about parenting issues, and then went to social media and went on stages all over talking about how important these social tools were in healthcare. Really not just for what we say, but ultimately how we listen and what we hear. And then it just kind of dawned on me that, of course, it was the lessons that social media was teaching me about how the wooden block turned into the most useful device that really built intimacy between human beings, where, coming back to the things we've been talking about all day, the kind of humanism that the parents and children on the panel, at the end of a talk on what do you want to whisper into an innovator's ear, was put your hand on my shoulder, build trust with me, show me love. So that's what I really want to bring to the hospital. So I really want to do that, though, by listening and involving patients and families, as it turns to this kind of paternalistic way we've done it. So what we've tried to do at Seattle Children's, at least in the beginning, is, for me, I just want to build value in the process of human-centered design, but really co-design, earnestly having patients and family develop ideas right alongside staff, providers, and clinicians and researchers. So this little circle was really just a 2-week iteration cycle that we used, where we looked at liver transplant families. We met with everybody on the team and some families in liver transplant, and everybody carries around these huge binders. And kind of following the Mayo Clinic Center for Innovation of, think really big, start small, move fast, we said, well, let's just digitize a tiny bit of it. So we identified the 6 to 12 hours of bedside teaching that happened by pharmacists. And then we started meeting with patients and families. And we interviewed 10 or 12 families at the beginning to say, what was it like at the time of transplant? Not just at listing, but really right at the time of transplant, when they were standing at the bedside, teaching them about why they were using medicines, how and the rationales of immunosuppression, and how to be stewards of a newly transplanted organ. And we used an outside iOS-based app called Tonic that was a survey tool module, and we kind of, I say hacked it, but our attorneys like me to say we reinvented it. We kind of hacked it on the back end and recoded, and we said, okay, well, let's build out this bedside teaching that didn't really have standard work, and let's include patients and families every step. So we created 14 chapters along with patients and families. The first and best idea came from families where they said, well, we never go on date nights. I said, why do you never go on date nights? Well, you told us we had to get the tacro in at like 7:30, and I don't trust the babysitter to do it at the right time. So we made a babysitter module that you can hand over after you're out of the hospital. And we digitized that 6 to 12 hours of teaching. And so now 14 chapters have patients and family videos, teachbacks and instructions, images of the medicine. We hacked another little app called Explain Everything that's like $1 on an iPad, where you could take a deck of PowerPoint slides, create an audio file over, and all of a sudden you've got a movie. So anyone in the world can be an educator if you just want to record yourself, and we put them in there. And every 2 weeks, we touch base with the clinical team, so nurse coordinators, hepatologists, surgeons. Then we touched base with our health education department, who was a little uneasy that we were digitizing all the pamphlets, because it takes 6 months to get a pamphlet through. And so we touch base with them every 2 weeks. We touch base with patients and families every 2 weeks. And then we touch base, having run this with a project manager. We've deployed it. We've taken our bedside teaching from 6 to 12 hours down to an hour. We have patients telling us they like the iPads better than the pharmacists, not because our pharmacists aren't great, but because they love to learn and they're sharing it. And we've now then done a gap, and we've moved from liver transplant to renal transplant. So we now have 15 different teenagers creating content and education for other teens who are getting transplants from kidneys. But we learned the most from patients and families, but the great news was that the patients and families were in arm's reach of staff and clinicians and some developers. And my hope is that this is hopefully the beginning of every solution that we create in an innovative place in the health space is dually centric. It's patient and family centric, but it's provider and care team centric simultaneously, so that these have legs. And we want everyone to use this. We're about to potentially beta test this at Cincinnati Children's, but anyone who has a liver transplant or renal transplant program, we'd love for you to take the curriculum that we've built and add on to it. So this should be an iterative place across the world. It does not need to be in one hospital. And you can put your own patient and family videos, we had 45 video debuts, getting people used to delivering healthcare using new tools. So we had 45 different people use video for the first time. So I'm hopeful that this will just start to change how we are more efficient and valued.
Thank you, Wendy Sue. Well, I hope you'll agree with me. This is really a illustrious and impressive group of innovation experts. We'd like to take the last couple minutes that we have with this panel to open it up to a conversation. So if there are questions in the audience, you can raise your hand, and I think the magic box, is that what we call it? I don't know, will come around. And feel free. Boxes are circulating. We have a question over there.
I'm going to throw it. Is that all right?
Wonderful presentation. I learned a lot. But I like to work in the garage. As I go on making rounds in the neonatal unit, I say to myself, can I make this? How soon can I make it? And if it takes 20 years to get something made, then it's become obsolete. How to fast track my ideas that, hey, I wish I could have that type of nipple for this cleft palate patient so he can feed quickly and go home. And what we have available will not do the job. But how to create something very quickly and say, hey, we made a change in this baby's condition, and he can go home quickly so mom can feed him. Simple things like that. How do we fast track innovation?
I think that there's two answers. One is the answer today, and the second is the answer which I think will be in like 3 to 5 years. Okay. The answer today is actually still not so simple, but there's a few things you can do. The first is to get a village around you, right? So reach out to wherever you are to design school, engineering. The best idea is to prototype early. So if you can find someone who can help you prototype something early, you'll have something physical you can hold in your hand and show it to. You can also try to find people at a business school near you who might be able to help put together a plan and give some business advice. So it's still somewhat of a cottage industry, so that's what it is today. I'll share with you a vision where I think it's going to go in 3 to 5 years, and that is, I think we're about on the cusp of a sea change, where there are going to be platforms for being able to accomplish just this, where it'll be possible to get onto the platform and find all the tools you need and be able to do it in 24 hours, what might now take 24 months. So that's where we're going, hopefully. Right now, you still need to do it in a more of a cottage industry way, but hopefully we're moving to a much better place. Anybody who's interested in this problem, please see me, because we're working a lot on it. And it is a very, very interesting phase that we're in right now. That's what I would call the democratization. So anybody else has?
I mean, for devices, it's about 8 years, not 20. And we've been inspired, several of us, including Amir at Chalk. We're going to create a neonatal device consortium or subset of iSpy, so it'll knock it down to 2 years max, hopefully. And we'll start out with your idea.
Great. Another question from the audience.
I just have a comment about fast-tracking medical devices for pediatrics. I had to create that fast track myself, to be honest with you, and that's what you have to do right now. We're 4 years into this, and we're probably 2 years ahead of the game, I think. But a lot of that isn't necessarily because we have a great product, because we hit the bricks, and we didn't take no for an answer, and we kept knocking on doors. Even when hospitals said, no, we don't know who's going to pay for it, blah, 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 blah. I need to talk to 50 people above me. I didn't take no for an answer. And that's how we, right now, have to fast track it. And we have to keep proving. And obviously, if something works, that's easier to do. If it doesn't work, that's a lot harder to do. And obviously, there's a lot of trials that might have to be done on certain things. But you just have to create that opportunity yourself. Because it's not going to happen any other way right now. But I think by all of us creating that opportunity, we can learn a lot from each other on that and how to make it more streamlined, make the process easier, and more efficient and effective.
I think that's a great point, that there's a lot of pioneering going on right now in pediatric innovation. But I think the good news is we're starting to see some adoption. There's a number of hospitals now. They're starting to put infrastructure in place and support. And I think for those hospitals that don't yet have that, the fact that they can point to other hospitals that have taken the lead and created infrastructure will help them get on board. And I think that's part of the vision of I Spy, that eventually all pediatric hospitals will be equipped to support rapid innovation and prototyping, and that the pioneering can really be focused on the innovation and not on the innovation infrastructure.
And the other incentive, the other big sea change is financial reimbursement, because up until now, a hospital got paid for every day that a baby was stayed in the NICU. But those times are changing. We're going to have DRG, ACO reimbursement, and anything that can get a child home safer and sooner is going to be cost effective, or more readily cost effective.
I have a question, not knocking Google, but the platform for Google compared to Apple, how would you compare that?
Who's Apple? Actually, Google is very accepting of people's personal preferences. So I think Google is one of the largest consumers of Apple products, believe it or not. So, I mean, in terms of being a very open culture, I kind of straddle the fence, and I have an Android and an iPhone. I have a Chromebook and and a MacBook. So, you know, I kind of see the different devices out there, but we stay very open. We say if there's a personal preference for a different device, let's use that, and then we'll create something that lives on that device as well. So, you know, I think it kind of goes back to, you know, working within reality in an environment out there where, you know, there might be a lot of variances in the market, and you need to adapt to each one.
All right, one last question in the back here.
Yeah, fantastic conference, and in this room I think there's 500 people who are innovators and people who are going to fast track ideas to products to usable devices. I haven't actually networked with a healthcare administrator yet, and I'm wondering if all of this innovation may be slowed down a little bit by the fear that seems to be in a lot of systems to introduce new ideas. And I wonder if you have any tricks or methodologies to bring on board, or are we going to have a conference, Pediatrics 2040, for healthcare administrators to get them on board with innovation?
Well, I think there are some administrators among us. I know I was talking to a couple yesterday, and I think you're right. The administration can be tremendous accelerants, and some of the hospitals that do have innovation programs have that type of leadership. And in other cases, if you don't have your administrators on board, they can be impediments. So I think there's an endless opportunity for the innovators to be explaining, convincing, and promoting to the administration the tremendous benefits to the patient and to the hospital itself of being innovative. And if you're not innovating, you're stagnating, and you may have the potential to be a dying organization. So hopefully most administrators will understand the tremendous power of innovation and how it can transform in a positive way their organization. But it's certainly a conversation that we'll continue to have. So I would like to thank the panelists for wonderful insights. I hope it was great food for thought for you. Thank the audience for great questions. Don, do you want to add any closing remarks?
Well, I think this last question was really good, and I hope that Anthony gets the CEOs together to talk to each other about this, because that would really, they're going to listen to each other more than they're going to listen to others. So anyway, I see the stop signs, Anthony. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.